Hello and welcome to this video on how to answer a 25-mark question, and it's going to focus on the African American question in the recent mock that we've just done. So we're going to find out today, how do we get top marks? So many of you have been asking, how do I frame my question? The mark scheme and information offered by AQA say the following: you have to have a very good understanding of the full demands of the question. You have to have well organised and effectively delivered, well selected, specific and precise information, a good understanding of the key features. It has to be fully analytical and a balanced argument with a well substantiated judgment. So how do we do this? We try and work out the focus of the question immediately. What is the question asking us? Read it and reread it. Underline a key important term within that. Plan your essay. Try and use a series of factors where you can group your information together, and that will be the basis of your argument. Start with any factors that are named in the question. It might be economic reasons, it might be political reasons, whatever that is. Try and use that as your beginning. Use the words of the question regularly to formulate your answer. Refer to the question as many times as you can. When you review your essays, I want you to highlight where you have used the exact terms of the question. If you're not using them, how can you be answering them? Return to the primary focus of the question at the beginning of each paragraph. Make sure you've got a clear structure. All of those will allow you to answer the question effectively and to score the highest marks possible. Now, in our rubric that you should have for most of your essays, we break it down to knowledge, explanation, analysis, judgment and organisation. So you've all seen these. You can now use these in your answers to try and improve them. African Americans made continuous progress in the years 1877 to 1890. Assess the validity of this view. It's a very specific question and it required a lot of specific information, and many of you were caught out by the dates. Now, we've been a little bit more generous in marking, where we've accepted some things that are very close to the time. In the real exam, I don't think the question would be this specific. I think it would be more likely to be 1865 to 1890. And many of your answers would therefore get better marks perhaps. So we're looking for specific and precise knowledge that answers the question, that is analytical and balanced, and it reaches this well substantiated judgment. So we've made a list and we've sort of planned our answer. We've highlighted continuous. What does this term mean? Well, for something to be continuous, it means throughout this period their lives have got better. Now, as you can see by the plan, we can argue contrary to this, and that's absolutely fine. You can argue whatever you want so long as it is balanced. You could argue that they did make continuous progress, but there were many incidences where their progress was limited. You could argue that it was not continuous, as we've done here in this essay. So in green we've got individuals like W.E.B. Du Bois. We've got Booker T. Washington, how they advanced the position of African Americans in this period, although it is more towards the end of the 1890 to 1900. We've got examples of the Tuskegee Institute. We've got education, how it improved in the North and the South for many Americans, African Americans. Literacy rates, how illiteracy fell from 90% to 50%. We've got the increase in black voting rights. We've got the 1875 Civil Rights Act that we could have brought in as well. Now, on the other hand, for balance, we've got all of the examples that go against this idea of continuous progress. It starts with Hayes removing troops. We've got the segregation of the railroads in 1881, extensive intimidation and violence of anyone that tried to vote. And then we've got clear examples: the poll tax in 1889 in Florida, 1890 in Mississippi introduced income and literacy tests. We've got 1892 lynchings, which I'd allow you to include as well. We've got the examples of sharecropping, the KKK, white supremacist groups, because remember, the KKK was effectively ended in 1872, although there were still examples of them meeting, etc. So we plan this together as different factors. We can group it together. So we start with an introduction. We address the question. We demonstrate our understanding of the period with contextual knowledge. We state our conclusion. We make that judgment straight away. Did they or did they not make continuous progress? Because that is going to be your answer. We outline the factors in your essay. So what does that look like? Our introduction is as follows. While African Americans made progress in the years 1877 to 1890, it was by no means continuous and was blighted by significant regression to many aspects of their lives, especially in the southern states. I've used the wording of the question twice in this opening paragraph. So you can see how that sort of breaks down. We've got the address of the question. African Americans made progress, but We've used contextual knowledge to sort of frame our argument to show that we're an excellent candidate. We've got a really good understanding of the period before, after and during, and we've got our judgment. However, the 1877 Compromise, often called the Betrayal, challenged much of the progression made during the Reconstruction. And then we've outlined our factors that's going to support that conclusion. There were changes made to the liberty and voting rights, challenges to their social and economic status, and a lack of protection in the law to the brutality of Southern whites. Those three factors are going to be our three main paragraphs. It might mean that you actually write 6 paragraphs because you want balance on either side, but those are the three main areas that we're going to talk about. Altogether, this is the perfect introduction. It is specific, it is precise, it has contextual knowledge, and it shows that there's going to be a logical structure. Now, we cannot deviate from that conclusion at the end, so you'll see that me arguing the progress was not continuous is going to be repeated in my judgment. You cannot contradict yourself at any point, or you risk losing that substantiated judgment. Now, how do we write our essay? I continually tell you to try and use the ideal structure, but it does require you to be a candidate that's aiming for B's and A's. I think Peel would be a perfectly acceptable way of writing, but you would have to write 2 paragraphs at every one ideal. But however you decide to write, whatever structure you use, you have to follow the same basis. You have to address the question, you have to use the wording of the question, you have to have a structure, and you have to talk about separate factors. Don't try and clump them together. So, our essay looks as follows. I'll give you some time. You can pause the video, you can read through my answer, start to highlight where you think I've used contextual knowledge, where I've used my own knowledge, where it's been specific, where I've used a judgment, where I've used explanation, etc. And then in the next slide I'll break it down for you. So you can see I've chose to write with the ideal structure. I could choose to write with Peel, but I feel that ideal meets the requirements of the question and the mark scheme more effectively. We've got the introduction of my point. African Americans failed to make continuous progress, particularly in regards to the challenges to their liberty and voting rights. My second paragraph would be African Americans failed to make continuous progress, in particular when we look at their social and economic status, and my third paragraph would be about brutality and protection in law. Then I've got a big piece of information about how I can illustrate, with specific regards to liberty and voting rights, how their lives were not continuously progressing. And you can see that it's very specific. It does use dates, which you don't have to do, but it helps to demonstrate that you're an excellent candidate. In green, I've got my explanation. How does that information actually answer the question? And for me, the green and the purple pieces, the E and the A, are the most important. This information is useful because it clearly demonstrates that African Americans' lives were limited, their ability to vote was limited, and therefore it cannot be considered as progress. You know, progress was the 13th, the 14th and the 15th Amendments. Progress was the troops in the South protecting their rights. When all of that's taken away and it's replaced by the Jim Crow laws and intimidation, then we cannot possibly claim and conclude that their progress was significant or continuous. In fact, as you can see in my last sentence, this must be considered as regression, is a better conclusion to make. Then I offer my balance in purple. However, it is important to remember that this was isolated to the southern states. Arguably, progression in the north should be taken into consideration. Now, I could just choose to leave it there, but I've decided to go on and illustrate my point with a piece of specific information. And then I've gone on to link to my second paragraph, that a reduction in African Americans' liberty and voting rights was just the first step in the reduction of their rights. The southern states limited their social and economic status. Now, my second paragraph is going to talk about that. So as you can see, if you read through my focused answer, it repeats the question repeatedly. It is focused, it has explanation, and it has balance. Now, alternatively, you could choose to just write the red, blue, and green in one paragraph, and another paragraph that tries to contradict the statement that you've just made, that actually there was some increase in voting rights. And you can talk about the North's increase in voting. You can talk about the number of people that are elected to the different Congress and House of Representatives, local government, and many of you did do that expertly, and you could choose to do that in a second paragraph. Now, I'd repeat this for my second and third paragraphs, and that would bring us to the point that many of us struggle with, which is our conclusions. How do we write a well-substantiated judgment in our conclusion? If we've been doing it correctly, it writes itself because we've been writing it in every paragraph. We've got those mini conclusions wherever we can. I want you to address the question again, probably for the 18th time, but however many times you do it, hammer home to that examiner that you are answering the question. You're not writing your own answer to another question, you're answering the question that's set. Summarize your argument. Avoid adding anything new. That is a big no-no in a conclusion. Signpost your success and bring it to a well-rounded conclusion. Here's my answer. So read through it, see if you can identify similarities to your own answers. See if you can identify where I've addressed the question, where I've summarised my main argument, and where I have given a clear judgment. I haven't deviated from it, I haven't contradicted myself. Where's my clear judgment? If you've done it correctly, then yours would look like this. In red, we've got our address of the question. In green, our summary of our argument, and our final judgment, why all of this information put together produces this answer. In conclusion, while there is a number of advances to the lives of African Americans, it would be inaccurate to claim that it was continuous. I've then illustrated that point, and lastly I've concluded this is why African Americans failed to make continuous progress in the years 1877 to 1890, and a claim to the contrary would be inaccurate. Throughout my answer, though, I've provided balance. I've provided that piece of information that tries to support other things, and you can see in green where I've tried to do similar things. Put all of those together and you cannot fail to reach full marks. So if we go all the way back to that mark scheme, we can say that we've got specific and precise information. We've demonstrated that through our use of dates, through our use of key individuals, through our use of specific and precise information. It doesn't waffle. It has answered the question because I've repeatedly shown how I've met the demands of it. It's analytical because I've been critical where I can, I've provided balance where I can, I've offered that analysis where possible, and there are repeated mini judgments. A well substantiated judgment at the end of my answer, but it's also there in each paragraph and in the conclusion. It's well organised and it's effectively delivered because I've got 3 clear paragraphs relating to the factors, or if you've chosen to write more, it is well organised. Altogether, if you put that together, that gives you the perfect answer, and that would not fail to reach level 5 banding, and the answer put together would be 21 to 25 marks. Thank you very much.